In 2023, an ex-NASA engineer claimed he built a machine that can lift itself against gravity without using any fuel. No rockets, no fire, no exhaust, just electricity. If true, it would break the most sacred laws in physics and rewrite everything we know about space travel. So, is this just another hoax or a door to the future? The engineer's name is Charles Boer. He used to work for NASA, making sure rockets don't blow up randomly. He was a part of the Space Shuttle, Hubble, ISS, and other huge projects. Now, Bueller and his team work at a private company called Exodus Propulsion Technologies, trying to build a long-term dream of space engineers, a spacecraft that doesn't need fuel. It's the kind of thing that would instantly change everything about space travel. Just think of the future where you could go to the moon, Mars, or wherever you'd like without spending tons of resources. And he claims that he and his team have finally cracked the code, that they've built a machine that can lift itself in the air without any propellant. You got it right. The team claims to have violated Newton's third law, the basic rule of our world that every action needs an equal and opposite reaction. For example, in rockets, you throw fuel out the back, that's action. Being pushed by it, the rocket goes forward. That's the reaction. A magical device like that would also violate the conservation of momentum. When you push on something, you gain momentum. But something else has to gain equal momentum in the opposite direction to balance the books. But this device would change the total momentum of the system out of nowhere. If you're getting motion without pushing against anything, how in the world did you do that? It's like a balloon that can somehow move forward without blowing out any air. If the machine actually works, there must be some new, unknown force of nature that we've somehow missed in hundreds of years of physics. Bueller himself called it the new force. Let's try to figure it out. To create this magical device, they used electrostatics. Their test device was a 30G object about the size of a card deck, and it managed to create thrust or push using electric fields, a kind of invisible force made by electric charges. The new force starts working when two things happen in the system. The first one is electric imbalance. There's some electric pressure happening across parts of the device, kind of like air pressure. If it's not spread out evenly across it, for example, one side has more electric push than the other. That's the first ingredient. And that happens when the electric field, the invisible force that electric charges create, is set up just right. It has to spread out in a certain way, not in straight lines, but uneven and fanning out, like sun rays or the spokes of a wheel. And boom, when it happens, the device pushes on itself and makes the whole object move. At first, the mysterious new force was tiny, barely noticeable, little to no thrust and noise. But with each upgrade, things started to shift. And in 2023, they finally measured enough thrust to overcome Earth's gravity. The weirdest part is that according to Bueller, in some cases, the thrust keeps going even when the power is off, as long as there's still charge left in the materials. That's weird. That's really weird. That hints at something totally new in physics, something deeper than we currently understand. So now any honest scientist starts sweating because that sounds bananas, and frankly it might be. Bueller admits this is still early work. The team published their discovery and got a patent. By the way, the company includes people who've worked at NASA, Blue Origin, and the US Air Force. They've been tinkering with this stuff for decades. Charles presented his findings at APEC, a conference for people who are passionate about alternative propulsion and crazy stuff like warp drives, anti-gravity, and ways to make Star Trek real. Now, they're actively working on that project. Of course, this stuff got very controversial and lots of scientists are skeptical. There might be a mistake no one has caught yet. So, they want to test the machine in space. If it works out there, too, it could change space travel forever. It might be real because it's not the first time we've discovered something like this. Recently, a startup called Evo Limited claimed that they'd built a quantum drive, another propulsion device that apparently didn't need fuel. They said they're tapping into a weird, controversial theory of physics called quantized inertia. It was cooked up by a British physicist named Mike McCulloch. He basically said that inertia, the thing that makes objects resist acceleration, isn't a basic rule of nature, but an effect caused by some weird quantum radiation at the edge of the observable universe. In simple words, if chi is right, then under the right conditions, you might be able to generate thrust without throwing anything backward. You don't need fuel, just electricity and a clever enough setup. Many scientists don't buy into it, but who knows? Maybe that's why these new inventions could actually work. Anyway, initially the IVO company was founded by a small team of tech guys who wanted to find wireless power. Their first big idea was called CBOT, capacitive-based aerial transmission, basically a fancy way to wirelessly send electricity through the air. But somewhere along the way, they pivoted. They started wondering, if we can move electricity through the air like this, can we move objects too? Can we rethink inertia itself? So in 2021, they began working on a propulsion device based on this quantized inertia theory. They built the quantum drive around this idea. It was a self-contained electric system. No fuel tanks, no combustion, just a plug-and-play box that makes spacecraft move. They said it's light, stackable, and can be bolted onto a satellite like a toaster, and it weighs just a few hundred grams, way lighter than traditional thrusters. In 2023, they tested it not in someone's garage, but in a legit vacuum chamber, simulating space conditions. The team said they ruled out every known force that might explain the results, and that it did generate thrust. Not a lot, but consistent and measurable. Then came the big moment. IVO and a partner company, Rogue Space Systems, launched the quantum drive into space. And now they're waiting for the results of the tests. A lot of physicists think it's all nonsense. Some of them noticed that this stuff is impossible because they'd be perpetual motion machines. Basically, if a device like this actually worked, you could use it to make infinite energy, which violates the first law of thermodynamics. But IVO says they're not doing that. They say chi works within our normal Newton's laws, just a bit differently. Anyway, all this stuff needs double-checking. Skepticism is so right because a lot of people get some unpleasant flashbacks. In 2001, a British engineer named Roger Shire introduced the M drive. It was this weird cone-shaped device that supposedly created thrust without pushing anything out the back. People were super excited. NASA even tested it with their Eagle Works team. And in 2016, they said they've detected tiny amounts of thrust from the M drive. The media absolutely blew up. People and scientists were hyped up. But later, bigger studies, including one from a German university that really went deep, found the sad result. It was just an experimental error. By 2021, the verdict was in. The M drive didn't work. It was all experimental noise, misunderstood data. Another dream went down the drain. Many propellantless designs have crashed into one huge, stubborn wall, the laws of physics. So, it's too early to say that these startups just changed the world forever. But if it turns out to be real, it's not just a new engine, it's a new era. You're on a plane when suddenly, boom, a loud explosion. The cabin shakes, alarms blare, and the aircraft tilts sharply before it starts to drop. Passengers scream, but you try to remember the safety rules for an airplane crash. Put on your life jacket, but don't inflate it until you're outside the plane. But what if the plane itself had a life jacket? I'm talking about something that inflates in seconds right before impact. Kind of like a giant airbag for airplanes. Only this one wraps around the entire fuselage. When it deploys, the plane basically turns into a big puffy Michelin Man cocoon. I know it looks kind of funny, but that funny-looking idea could actually save hundreds of lives and change the airline industry for good. Yep, plane crashes could finally become a thing of the past, but only if we're willing to make one huge trade-off. Don't worry, I'll get to that. In June 2025, Air India Flight 171 took off from Ahmedabad, India, heading to London. But just seconds after takeoff, it crashed straight into a nearby medical building. It was heartbreaking. All 12 crew members and 229 passengers lost their lives that day. Incredibly, one man, 40-year-old Vishwas Romesh from the UK, survived. He'd been sitting in seat 11A right next to an emergency exit. According to preliminary investigations, both switches controlling the plane's fuel supply were shut off just seconds after liftoff. Without fuel, the engine simply didn't have enough power to keep climbing. Now imagine the fear the pilots and passengers must have felt realizing there was no way out. This tragic event stuck in the minds of two engineers from the Birla Institute of Technology and Sciences in Dubai, Ishal Asim and Darren Srianvasan. They couldn't stop thinking about it or about all the lives lost. So they decided they had to do something. One question kept running through their minds. Why isn't there a system that helps people survive after a plane failure? Because the truth is, Most airplane safety technologies are designed to prevent crashes, but very few help you survive one. And that's where their idea took off. They wanted to create something different, something that could truly shape the future of aviation. So they dove into hours and hours of intense research and development and came up with a project called Rebirth, which they describe as the first AI-powered crash survival system. But the world is already calling it something else. The crash-proof airplane sounds awesome, but how does it actually work? Well, like I mentioned earlier, it's similar to that good old safety feature we all know from cars, airbags. Only in this case, they don't protect passengers inside the cabin. Instead, these airbags wrap around the outside of the aircraft, triggered by advanced AI detection systems. But actually, the project goes way beyond just an inflatable aircraft design. In total, their system uses 5 smart technologies to help when a crash is inevitable. These features can predict crashes, slow the aircraft, protect passengers, and even guide rescuers to the scene. Time to get into some aviation safety explained. First, there's AI detection. The Rebirth system kicks in the moment a plane leaves the ground. Think of it like having a super intelligent Siri or Alexa on board, but one with a PhD in airplanes that can practically become the pilot if needed. This AI constantly monitors altitude, speed, engine performance, direction, fire sensors, and pilot response. Basically, it's connected to everything happening during the flight. If something feels off, it raises an alert. And if a crash becomes unavoidable below 3,000 feet, the system automatically activates and can even take control of the aircraft. Next up, the airbags. If there's a system failure and a collision becomes inevitable, the AI activates high-speed airbags. In less than 2 seconds, they inflate like a giant piece of popcorn bursting open. The airbags pop out from the front, bottom, and back of the plane. Then they blow up until the whole plane looks like a flying bounce house. This tech is made of layered fabric that absorbs the impact and protects the plane's body. In theory, this protective padding makes sure the landing isn't too rough, no matter how fast the plane's going. Next, we've got something called reverse thrust. It's actually something pilots already do. Reverse thrust happens when a plane's engines push air forward instead of backward, and that helps the plane slow down after landing. But let's say it's a critical situation. The pilot's unconscious and the engines are still running. That's when the Rebirth system kicks in and automatically switches the engines into reverse mode to slow the descent. And if the engines are completely out, no worries. That's when gas thrusters kick in. These boosters fire up to reduce the aircraft's speed and stabilize it during the fall, cutting the impact force by up to 20%. Then we've got smart fluids. These are special materials hidden inside the walls and seats. They stay soft and comfy most of the time, but the moment there's an impact, they instantly harden to absorb the shock and protect passengers from getting hurt. And finally, we have the rescue aid's face. After impact, the system shoots out an infrared beacon, GPS coordinates, and flashing lights, plus a bright orange coating, so rescuers can spot the plane and reach survivors fast. For now, it's just a prototype, but a very promising one. Their simulations showed a reduction in impact force of over 60%, and that could truly be life-changing. At this point, they've got the data, the simulations, and the design all ready to go. The next step is to put it through real-world testing, like in wind tunnels and controlled conditions. And even though everyone's pretty excited to see this airplane safety technology working, there are still some concerns. Remember that major trade-off I mentioned earlier? Well, here it is. Adding airbags to planes would massively increase their weight, because these airbags would have to be huge to actually reduce the impact forces of a commercial aircraft. And if they're that big, then they're going to be super heavy, too, right? There are also some concerns about how effective the AI monitoring system would really be. Experts explained that while AI could sense a plane's proximity to the ground and decide when to deploy safety measures, there are still many real-time variables to consider when making an off-airport landing. And as for those giant airbags, adding them to commercial planes would make the aircraft much heavier, which might not be all that practical. It would require massive innovations in airplane engineering, all to prevent a type of accident that might only happen once in decades. So, yeah, not everyone's totally convinced just yet, because we have to remember, airplane crashes are actually very rare, even if it doesn't always feel that way. Lately, People on social media started coming up with theories that they're becoming more frequent, but that's just not true. Statistics show that there's been a decline in air accidents over the past 2 decades. Experts say you're actually a lot safer flying than you are driving to the airport. The odds of someone passing away during a commercial flight are incredibly low, about 1 in 13.7 million passenger boardings worldwide. What I mean is air travel is still the safest way to get around. But hey, if we can make it even safer, why not, right? And that's exactly what the Rebirth Project is all about. By the way, their idea is so impressive it became a finalist for the prestigious James Dyson Award, an honor given to inventions that could truly change the world. And even though their idea could be a winner, the team says fame isn't the goal. They see this competition as a chance to push their vision forward, to make air travel safer for everyone, and maybe one day help save lives when everything else fails. So yeah, there are still some challenges, but this new safety tech could truly change the airline industry once and for all. That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright.